welcome back to the Web3 Native Podcast and part of the Year of the DAO mini-series. I'm your host, Shikai, and today we have a great guest with us, Tarun Gupta, the founder and CEO of Coinshift. Hello, Tarun.
Hey, Shikai, how are you?
Great. Yeah, it's so good to see you again. So Tarun and I, we catch up fairly regularly on Telegram and also on like a monthly basis. We have a calls. So we were talking a lot about DAO infrastructure and including like some of the business models of DAO infrastructure. And today we love to bring that conversation to the podcast. And of course, weave in a lot about what Coinshift is doing, right? Because Coinshift is one of the top treasury management solutions for DAOs that's built on Gnosis Safe and is being used by some of the largest DAOs in the space. So we'd love to tap into some of your insight and experience on that.
100%. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. So let's go right into it. So I thought it would be great to first start with a broad picture of the state of DAO infrastructure, because we've actually talked to quite a few people around the various angles, right? About like from the DAO perspective, from like a contributor perspective, and now we want to talk about the infrastructure perspective. So there's a whole stack that we can talk about, right? From like the Gnosis Safe that we're very familiar with to things like governance or Snapshot, which was a guest as well. And then so many applications that are built on top, be it like treasury management, reputation, bounties, and so on. So how would you describe like the landscape or the stack, right? How do you conceptualize it?
100%. So how I think about the DAO tooling kind of on DAO infrastructure landscape is like there are like multiple layers to it, right? And how I would like to divide it like into multiple layers so that in each layer we'll have certain tools and then how those tools can or cannot be composable with each other and what are the different pros and cons of that layer, right? So maybe you would like to like start with the layer 0. So layer 0, I just feel like now we have certain tools like Gnosis Safe, which is like a multi-sig standard. And if you're a DAO or if you're a Web3 company, still it's like a multi-sig standard, right? You can just use that to create like a shared account with multiple members, and you can just do like multi-sig simple kind of transactions through it. But there are other tools in that sort of layer 0 where you can just create your DAO. So if you would love to like create your protocol DAO, you have Compound Bravo governor framework, which is being used by all of the major DeFi protocols, right? So I just see all these systems tied in the layer 0 part where you just have like the base level primitive how to create a DAO, right? And then you can just have more frameworks like this where you have like Aragon is there. You can consider that into the layer 0. So what is interesting about this layer 0 is some of the tooling and infrastructure are just correctly saying like we are exactly creating it for DAOs, right? So Aragon is like a system which is specifically for DAOs. But what is challenging for these layer 0 system is like how composable, how use case agnostic they could be, so that there could be like multiple level of tooling can be created on top of it. Because if this base level is not composable enough, people will need to create their own systems, right? And that's why if you just see, I just feel like Gnosis Safe is winning in this category because they are very, very composable. On the base layer, they don't consider themselves as a DAO tooling, but still it is like the major infrastructure being used by every other DAO. So if you just see like, let's say your larger DAO is sitting on Compound Governor framework, right, which is again in the layer 0, but still their subcommittees are sitting on Gnosis Safe, because Gnosis Safe is the only solution in this market which says like you can start up with the small kind of shared account and you can just exit to the community, right? So I just feel like this layer 0 primitive level tooling is definitely there, and there are not so many tools in this layer 0 right now, but the take here is like this should be composable enough, this should be like modular enough so that people can build more use case kind of thing. The other thing is like I would like to add here is layer 0 could be use case agnostic as well. So maybe you want to create a DAO on this layer 0 framework, but it is not only like investment DAO, right? It is not only like protocol DAO. So you can think through that primitive level as well. So this is like the layer 0 kind of play, and then there are some of the names I would say. then how I see is like, based on these primitives, there are more tooling coming up in multiple verticals, which is like a layer one kind of system. And there are a lot of tooling is coming there. So there are payroll like tools, there are treasury management tools like ours, like Coinshift is there, right? Then there is HR kind of tool is there, which is like Orca protocol, which is underlying again built on top of layer zero, which is Gnosis safe, right? And there are more and more tooling, if you just see, are coming up based on this layer zero. And the challenge for layer one kind of tooling is like what is exactly happening in the layer one is, because now you have the base level smart contracts, which is by default is like, I would say, decentralized and owned by a DAO. Now these layer one tools are a combination of sort of off-chain and on-chain components, because they are use case specific. And why they are use case specific? Because it makes a lot of sense. Now you have like a base level primitive. Now you want to create like a payroll solution. The payroll solution has to be like a specified use case, right? There are specific data associated with that, and you need to take care of that. And the data could be sensitive. You can't just share it like on IPFS and share the salaries of your main core contributors. You cannot do that. So I'll not name like one of the largest DAO we were working with. They were like really got angry. Like, you can't just make things public. If you're a DAO, it doesn't mean like you want to share that. You may want to share the data with specific people. So that's why this layer one tooling, I just feel it'll be very, very competitive, first of all, because they are sitting in like in their silos and maintaining and building certain stuff. And there is lack of standard in layer one, if you just see. Because if you just compare all the tools today in layer one of this system, they have like certain patterns. So Coinshift has like contacts, right? Parcel also has like contacts. Utopia also has like contacts, right? All the certain patterns are definitely there, but there is no standard. And it'll be very, very difficult for the user in the future. Like, how will they gonna choose one tool over other, right? It is very difficult for the user. So on the base level, user is clear, like we are using Gnosis safe, our treasury is there. But on the layer one, it becomes very competitive. So my thesis is like, can we build like a good standard on the layer one, so that tomorrow the data portability should be very easy. There could be clear value propositions among the layer one tooling, and user should be able to plug in between systems very seamlessly. So there could be on-chain primitives, there could be off-chain primitives, but it should have interoperability. Otherwise, like, this layer will struggle the most, I would say. And then right now, as like, so if layer one is clear, I think then I just feel like there will be certain tools which will build like the entire use case specific infrastructures. So if somebody really wants to build like a gusto for for DAOs, they'll build like the entire payroll infrastructure. And when I say payroll, the compliance is there, the entire health benefits is there, right? The entire specific use case infrastructure is there, and somebody will really want to build on top of that infrastructure as well. And that I consider as a layer two kind of system in the DAO tooling. And that is yet to come. Nobody has like proven like the real layer one, I would say, like the real kind of system. So what we realized pretty early on is like where we want to set, right, as Coinshift. And I think what we realized is like, definitely layer one is important, but there is a lack of clear sophistication in layer zero, between layer zero and layer one infrastructure, and we want to sit in between. And I'll go deep into that as well, like what exactly we're trying to do here in between like multiple layers. But that is my understanding. So it should be very, very important for someone to understand the DAO stack as like, if you're going towards the primitives route, you just need to think through it, like how composable it is. If you are going towards the silos kind of use case kind of route, you need to think through the standards, you need to think through the interoperability, because end of the day, it will become like a web 2 kind of application then, right? And for users, it will become very, very hard. So yeah, this is like a short kind of stack. Yeah.
All right, all right. That's a great overview. The concept of between like layer 0, layer 1. I think not to be confused with how people usually refer to
Yeah.
layer 0, layer 1 in blockchains, right? That's more like a different concept
Yes.
of like having blocks. Here we're talking about the infrastructure for DAOs specifically. Uh, yes, yeah, I think you already started to mention how Coinshift is positioned in this layer 0 to layer 1 relationship, right? Would you like to expand a bit on that? Like, what does it mean to sit between? So, what's then your relationship with Gnosis Safe that you're built on top, and what's your relationship with the other layer 1 players as well?
100%. So when we were building this layer 1 system, which is this treasury management piece on top of Gnosis Safe, we were just thinking like, what exactly we are doing here, right? So a lot of these tooling, this kind of tools, right, just rely on Gnosis off-chain infrastructure and on-chain infrastructure. So what does it means? So the on-chain infrastructure means they're smart contracts, where it says like it's a multi-sig contract, and you can just able to execute a transaction in a multi-sig way, right? But to gather those signatures from multiple parties, there is an entire process of consensus, and you need to build like a really good system which proves like this is the consensus system. So let's go a little deep into that. So let's say today you want to do like a transaction in a multi-sig fashion, and which is like a 3 out of 3 multi-sig, right? So how Gnosis has built the infrastructure there is, you can come to the Gnosis UI, you can create like 5 transactions, because there could be a chance where the other 2 signers are not available at the same time, right? So you need to enable asynchronous transaction creation, right? So you can just create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 transactions, and whenever those other signers are available, they can come and just approve it, right? So this asynchronous transaction creation is entirely off chain, first of all. The second part is where their system really shines is, how will you really achieve like a good consensus, right? So now let's say you approve the first transaction, then you approve the second transaction, but the third transaction is like, it's like it is not achieving the consensus. So maybe it's a 3 out of 3 multi-sig, and now one signer has rejected it, 2 signer has approved it. Now what will you do in that situation from the software perspective? You can't just say this transaction should be rejected or this transaction should be approved. So from the software tooling perspective, what they did is they allow you to change your decision. So maybe there is some problem with your understanding of that, decision, and you can just change it. And in the worst case scenario, if the consensus is not achieved, you can just reject the transaction, and you can just reject the transaction on chain. So rejection is allowed on chain, basically. You People are not aware about like, why you're paying like a gas fees for rejecting the transaction, because there is a certain number of stacks of transactions are existing, and you can't just just change the transaction signatures in that particular order, because the other transactions will get affected because of that, right? And blockchains work like this. You need to send transactions in a certain order. So this entire off-chain infrastructure is built by Gnosis, basically. This is the extra angle to the on-chain sort of primitives, right? And now all the layer 1 tooling majorly uses these APIs directly provided by Gnosis. And there are a lot of issues to that. Definitely, like, there are not kind of any, like resiliency to those APIs, if I would say it correctly. They're more of a, it's an open. Gnosis has built like a great system which is open source, and you want to run your own infrastructure on top of it. So this will give like a lot of problems when one system goes down, these all layer 1 tooling just go down. And that is not the ideal way of building like a Web3 application, right? So what we decided pretty early on is like, what kind of tooling we really want to build. If we are saying like we are a really resilient solution on built on top of these really beautiful, I would say, smart contracts, which is Gnosis Safe, we need to build that entire off-chain infrastructure ourselves. And once you build that entire off-chain infrastructure, you have like a lot of control on the consensus system. So for example, I'll give you a very basic example. So in the similar example, let's say you have 5 transactions, and the third transaction is having the problem of consensus, right? So if your consensus system is under your control, you may allow signers to say like, just edit the data of the transaction. and preserve that nonce. Why you are paying $100 to reject that transaction? You can control that experience. Maybe you want to just, if it is like the end of the stack, you can give the option of deleting the transaction because it is entirely option. You don't need to reject. Rejection should be in the worst case. So once we understood, all these concepts, we were very clear, like, if we really want to believe into that thesis where the layer 2 applications of DAO tooling will build on this layer 1, the underlying layer should be very sophisticated and enterprise ready. So that's why we decided to revamp like the entire infrastructure. And today we see ourselves in more of a 0.5 layer, so that the base contracts are still Gnosis safe, and we definitely always rely on them because they're the most proven and gold standard. But the infrastructure should exist, right? And it is better for the communities to have like a real alternative. When one system go down, the transaction should not go down. So that is the vision we have. And we can even talk more about like what are the other pieces we are trying to cover with the upcoming release. But I think this is like the base level stacking kind of structure where we lie ourselves. So from 0.5 layer to the one first layer. Yeah.
Right. So the funds and the ultimate transactions still happen on Gnosis Safe, on chain, but the process of signing it and the transactions that are supposed to be signed, like the consensus part, the signing part, can be off chain and just needs to be standardized. And Coinshift is planning to run an alternative to the Gnosis API that currently everybody uses. Right. I see. Yeah. So would this be, I presume that because like you said, it's kind of 0.5, right? So it's not only Coinshift that will be using this solution, right? This is kind of like a standard that you're trying to also share with the other layer 1 tools as well. So could you share more about who are the other players who are building in the layer 1, so to speak? Right, who are the ones with some major traction or like a differentiated positioning, and how you can work with them?
Yeah, we are like definitely this infrastructure we are not openly out right now, but once we release this, I think we would love to work with all the layer 1 systems. Like some of them definitely competing with our V1 today, but we would love to work with them definitely. And there are a lot of players in different niches, so I think like Maltes is there, and they are trying to build like a crypto kind of banking experience where you can just connect your bank account as well, and you can just create like a MasterCard on top of your Gnosis treasury. That is very interesting, right? And then Parcel is there. So Parcel is majorly focusing on the DAO tooling in terms of the contributors kind of economy, where contributor economy itself is a very big game in itself, right? Maybe one DAO could be like larger than any country. It could be the case, and there will be a lot more contributors, right? And that is a very interesting compensation kind of gameplay there. And an underlying layer is still Gnosis safe, I would say. And then Utopia Labs is there, so they are focused on specifically on payroll side of things, where you can they're going to offer like W9s and all that. And then they're also kind of similar kind of mass payout kind of tool, like our V1, but they're highly focused on payroll and they want to extend that entire infrastructure into that. So this is more on the payroll compensation side. Then we have, I think, Orca protocol, which is more of a structural kind of thing. Like how will you create structures? How will you really scale your DAO? So we realized like, okay, like creating subcommittees is the only way to create. But the underlying layer is still Gnosis safe. So Orca is trying to create like a protocol on top of Gnosis safe, which will have like a structures and pods, right? So that is really, really good. So these are like some of the names. I think like Syndicate is also looking to create like investment clubs on top of Gnosis, which makes a lot of sense, right? And yeah, so there will be n number of verticals you can see can be built on top of this layer 0, right? So yeah.
Yeah, so between so many players already, of course, the space is going to be huge and still growing. There's plenty of opportunity for everyone. But right now, how do you see these players being differentiated? You did mention that some of them are somewhat competing with Coinshift version 1 as well, right? Is it perhaps the kind of players that you are servicing? So what kind of like DAOs are actually using Coinshift versus these other solutions?
Right. So one thing is very, I think how we're trying to differentiate ourselves, we're a true kind of alternative to Gnosis. UI if you just see. So I would just say, like, if you manage your core treasury functions, you want to swap the honor, you want to create new honors, you want to create like a new safe, right? It's like a core treasury functions, right? You want to replace your multi-sig committee members. So all those operations are highly managed. So you don't need to use any other tool if you use Coinshift today. So there is no back and forth between your main treasury and then Gnosis Safe UI, unless there is some protocol upgrade you want to do, which we don't support. So that is there, right? And with V2, we'll make it so extensible so that it'll become your main treasury home. So the other solutions, maybe we can talk about, like, the payroll one, where they have specifically requirements specifically to payroll kind of things, like request payment links, right? But as a user, you need to use both the softwares, like Gnosis UI plus that X software. But with Coinshift, it is not the case. You can just completely use it. And with V2, as I mentioning, like, it'll be like a complete alternative. So that's how, we are trying to do. And it's great as well, because if everyone is like just building the entire same thing, that doesn't make sense for the user as well. So how I see this is going is, users don't have any good options other than Gnosis UI right now, which I think we want to really provide that experience. Plus, you'll be able to use Parcel tomorrow, you'll be able to use Utopia tomorrow, and you'll be able to tag those transactions as well. And maybe if we can build like a good standard with these folks, I think it'll be good to have like a plugin kind of system where you can just see, other apps are integrating each other's communications very seamlessly, right? So it should be very, very seamless for the users. But right now, it's not the case. And the DAOs which are using us are specifically like, really large grant programs. And in crypto, like the grants is like, running like a really, really big committee in itself, right? Grant programs are there, and there are certain DAOs which have like a lot of committees in itself, right?
Would you be comfortable sharing some of these names, or?
I would avoid, but yeah, I think Uniswap is there with a lot of their committees. Their main treasury is definitely sitting on compound governor framework, but they create like underlying committees like analytics committee or UGP subcommittee, and then they have like grants program committee, then they have like 1-2 more committees. So they're trying to manage like the entire committees into us. Then we have like per protocol they have like lot of committees under them. They're literally waiting for the V2, because they have like so many committees to manage. And I'll just tell you, the pain points of scaling a DAO is not only on the base infrastructure is so messed up, you cannot really scale your DAO. So we can talk about it as well. And then there is balancer grants is there. Then we have Prime DAO is there, which have like a lot of other committees like Prime Rating and all that. And there are definitely some very large companies like Consensus is there. So the needs of those Web3 companies as well as quite similar, because they have like multiple roles and permissions in between different committee members, right? They also want to manage like multiple safe accounts into Coinshift. So the definitely needs are there, but yeah, see, these are some of the names.
I see. So it's actually somewhat differentiated in terms of like the primary need or problem of like the DAO or organization is facing, right? So from what I'm hearing from you, it sounds like Coinshift helps more with like the committee consensus signing kind of mechanism, where some of these other players, if they are more focused on, say, an overall like contributor, which is more freelance, like a larger contributor pool, then they might want to use a different solution. Or if it's more for like just payroll for like one group, then like they can run that fairly easily.
Exactly.
I see. Yeah, you said something quite interesting just now about like the infrastructure being so messed up that it's hard for DAOs to scale. Would you like to expand on that?
Definitely. I think I'll give you like a very simple example, right? Right now, we're just relying on these multi-sig committees to take decision. Every single decision is being passed through the multi-sig committee. And the solutions you are seeing in the market as like definitely people are coming with the delegation kind of module, where you can just, maybe elect like an admin, like this person, maybe the head of finance or the strategy lead for that committee will going to run your operations, right? And the way it is working is like an off-chain kind of role you can spawn, and then that person can maybe propose a transaction to the multi-sig committee, and maybe it's like a recurring flow, maybe it's like any kind of workflow in short, and that and that day that the signers will come and they can just do it, that particular operation. This is like a good solution, and we are also working on the similar approach. But I think we can think more trustless ways where we can just scale operations autonomously. So for example, how I think is like, let's say there is a multi-sig committee, and now basically why we want to asking them for the transactions. There could be certain kind of mixtures or smart contracts can be built which can be trustlessly doing a lot of things. So I'll give you an example. So let's say certain committee want to hire like a delegate. It could be Coinshift, unless we are not doing any malicious activity. And how we can protect that? We are just allowed to execute only certain operations on a certain time window with the specific call data, right? We're not allowed to do anything else. So now what will happen is, let's say tomorrow, certain DAO will say like, this workflow needs to get executed on a certain date. And this is the call data you are signing from the multi-sig committee. So now you're involving the signers only for the alliance kind of part, right? And when you want to remove that delegate, but other than that, the entire operations is being managed automatically. You don't literally need to invite the signers, and because it's trustless, right? You can just create smart contract like that. So we want to build certain kind of modules in a very specific manner, so that it will just automate the entire industry. So this is one example, and definitely there could be more workflows we can just automate in a trustless manner. So in short, delegation plus scope plus alliance, you can just combine this with the multi-sig call data, and you can do a lot of wonders. Into this particular module can do a lot of wonders to the entire system.
Right. So scaling by delegating specific
Exactly.
rights for particular type of actions or assets, so that you can actually push more decisions to the edges or to your partners. I see. Yeah, actually talking about this makes me want to also discuss some of the other tools that DAOs use, right? Because clearly, if everything goes through a subcommittee and you have to sign off for everything, it's very inefficient. So a lot of the day-to-day decisions and the consensus actually is done before you even get to that stage, right? And this is where places like your own forums, on like your Notion, on your Discord, your Telegram group, these conversations are happening, and often like some of the decisions are made there, and then the on-chain is just a formality, right? So that whoever is there, they will just approve it. And I also noticed that increasingly we are seeing some players who say, oh, we're building the Web3 Discord, the Web3 Notion, and so on. I'd love to hear your views on like how those players are emerging as well, and then whether they could play a part in this ecosystem.
Yeah, so I think like I'm not like a rigid kind of, have any rigid kind of thought process. Anything could be done in this space, because this space is all about experimentation. But my viewpoint is basically, end of the day, how I see this is, any core Web2 like company which has like a core value proposition, there are three parts to it, right? So for example, we can talk about the Notion. So if you just see Notion or Slack, they are a tool which manages your entire documentation of the entire organization. You just don't have any issues with the Notion. I don't personally have any issues with using Notion, right? The only issue is that if I am a very highly crypto native company, I cannot just use Notion basically, because of the authentication system and of the payment system. So there is core value proposition lies in the Web2 company, then there is payment system, then there is authentication system. And authentication system and payment system is highly centralized right now, right? If you just talk about it. So the time when these companies, these Web2 companies realize like, okay, like we need to enable one more authentication system, which is Web3 wallet, right? The entire game changes, because nobody wants to share your sensitive files on IPFS. Nobody really, right? So the core value proposition just changes because there is one more authentication method. And how about if they can enable like the obviously Gnosis safe integration as well. So now the question comes when they'll do that, and it's definitely Discord. A lot of people try to do it as Discord. Gamers just hated it, and it didn't happen. So I would say there is a definitely like some players will emerge who will build like Web2 for Web3, but I'm not very not very encouraged in terms of building like the same amount of infrastructure again, and maybe build like that kind of infrastructure which can plug in easily with them. But definitely there could be a case where these Web2 companies will never integrate, this new authentication system, and Web3 companies will need like a solution. So there are other ways to do that as well, but I think the fundamental is like authentication and payment system. And if Web2 companies will integrate it, then there will be a lot of competition. You can see like you cannot build like the same amount of infrastructure in Web2, right? It's very difficult. So yeah.
Right. So actually, the part that has the most value is either the ones that are on-chain or related to your on-chain activity or identity, right? So in fact, what I'm hearing from you as well, and which kind of aligns with my understanding, is that there's no need to really rebuild a lot of the Web2 things, be it like documentation or like chat apps, forums. But what we really need is some way to bring that identity and like authentication, as you said, in a way the consensus maybe even on the multi-signature on what should be on the documentation, or like who should be allowed to change that, and instead of like having those permissions be under an email address and a domain, which is back to like the whole world, to then be more tied to your Web3 rights and your assets, which could be your signing rights, some sort of NFT or token holdings.
Exactly. And Twitter did it, right? So there is no, Twitter just enabled like the OpenSea integration, if you just see, right? So they also did it. Like the Web3 integration is not that hard. So there will be certain applications who will build this infrastructure, and maybe I see a lot of value. Like there will be some tools like OAuth, right? So OAuth really, when it is built, it became like the standard for all the entire internet companies, how to build authentication. So maybe there will be tools in Web3 will build like this new authentication very seamlessly for these companies.
Absolutely. All right, let's switch gears a little bit to now talk about then the future of these players, the infrastructure pieces, and how they could capture value, right? Because I think that's one of the biggest questions that people have right now. And I presume like during the fundraise and so on, investors are always asking, so how will you make money, right? Because with many of these tools, firstly, things I know to say, it's already open source and open for everybody to use. And then similarly for the things that are built on top, then there are alternatives as well, because the underlying is already open. So if you start charging, then somebody else can just make a free version or try to monetize in a different way. It's kind of a never-ending race to the bottom. So I think there needs to be some form of creativity in how we think about this, right? And we had some of this discussion in our chat group. So what are your current thoughts about business model for the different, maybe different layers and different players of DAO infrastructure?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question, and nobody has like the right answer to it, because I just feel like we are just, we have not even scratched the system and ecosystem as an industry right now. So I definitely have some thought process and would love to share that, like how I think about it. So one thing is very clear as like, this new primitive is here to stay, right? Which is this DAO model, and this is governance structure. That is something, the paradigm shift we all know, like that is here to stay. So one thing we clearly know is like, if you have like a good economics under this system, you can sustain over a longer period of time. That is like the minimum. So how I see this, if there is a, spectrum or there is a line, there will be multiple tools fitting into that line, and maybe there are some worst case scenarios and there are some best case scenarios. It's not like a 0-1 game, right? Either you'll have a business model or you'll not have a business model. So the worst case, let's talk about the worst case scenario in my head is basically, I think if you have a product market fit, if you are building the right tool for the right market, this space, you just need to sustain, and you just need to have like a good treasury diversification in terms, let's say you build like a tool. Let me give an example. Like you build like a tool and you basically have like a product market fit, and you have like a most used system. For example, we have Gnosis, right? They are just becoming like a DAO. There is no business model of that DAO right now. And still, does it have any value? Yes, it has. Like, a lot of people are just, businesses like ours are literally building on top of them. And they are innovating a lot in terms of incentivizing these ecosystem partners with the vesting airdrops, right? It's like a new system. So I just feel once you have a product market fit and you want to decentralize the infrastructure and decentralize the protocol thing, I think you should have like enough money maybe as a strategic raise, right? To sustain, first of all, it's a part of sustainability. And then over that period, I just feel like you shouldn't be thinking very rigid on like, the base layer should only get incentivized. You can literally build like a DAO with multiple committees, and certain committee will build certain products and services on this base layer, and that they can accrue a lot of value to the entire ecosystem, right? And that can be built. So just like in a lot of web2 companies, if you just see like the base system does not charge anything, but they have like the most value. Because in case of Google, it is search, right? I'm not saying like we should go about the ad model. The thesis is basically just focus on the right tool with the larger community, and then when you exit to the community, at least have like a sustainability through vesting to strategic investors, and then just figure out like more product and services, if it is making sense or not, to really go from like this starting layer to the end game, which is like, having like the best DAO with the best revenue model with the best value accrual system. But at least the worst case should be sorted. So if you don't have a product which does not have a product market fit, I think this is not a discussion, right? Then it's a big challenge for the startup. That is not a DAO anymore. There's like a different ball game in itself. Then I see there will be certain tools which will accrue value by default, and there are certain protocols. Maybe they can, maybe today they are not switching on the fees because of the fork or legal reasons. There could be a number of reasons today, but once regulation will be sorted on these tokens, or right now there are a lot of challenges in terms of regulation, we all know, right? And that's why people are just skeptical, like they don't want to come up with the good business model directly. They just want to wait. So I just feel like when those kind of primitives will come, you can monetize like a module maybe on top of Gnosis Safe, right? Directly. That is like an exact value accrual will happen directly. Maybe you'll build like a vault which gives you by default insurance on your Gnosis Safe, right? And you can just charge the user right away, right? And there's a lot of innovations could happen there. Then I just feel like the other spectrum is like, if you just get it right, is all also depends on the economics of that system. So end of the day, what we all want to achieve is, Bitcoin does not have any revenue to the Bitcoin Foundation, right? But it has like a built-in value accrual system in the network because of the usage of that particular currency in that network. And we shouldn't be thinking network always about the blockchain, like there are certain nodes. We can just think that particular analogy in this system as well, where you have multiple agents, and if you just fill the economics right, if you just have the vesting right, if you just have like a particular system where maybe DAO to DAO mergers, or certain DAO is working for certain DAO and accruing the value in a certain form, and that money goes to treasury, and then treasury is revolving as like a good sustainable mechanism for the entire system, right? So there are a lot of ways, in short, you can figure out the sustainability in the long term. So it's a game of long term in my head.
Yeah, well, long term is undoubtedly the case, because as you have mentioned right now, it's totally open to anybody's imagination and experimentation, right? I hear a few things from you. One is if it's a direct kind of like financial business model, then often the core product itself is probably free. And because it's currently free, there's no way to start charging for it very easily. But I hear some ideas on like, we could have a freemium, like with the Gnosis insured vaults kind of model, or presumably with Coinshift as well, certain like premium features that can be monetized, right? The other thing we just discussed was around like the ad model, which sounds kind of evil because you are trying to allow other people to influence behavior. But in a way, actually, it does capture the social value of the protocol or the product, right? Like if a lot of people are using it, I'm willing to buy the attention of people and get a better visibility for my products. Well, I guess if it's more of a socially curated recommendation rather than whoever has the most capital can then like influence other people's behavior, then perhaps it's a more acceptable form of advertising. It's more organic, more user driven, and these products the infrastructure players that are widely used are in a good position to capture that, right? Like doesn't matter which ones, that you decide to curate which DAOs you want to curate, which tools you want to curate. But because it's happening with perhaps your token, you can have some of those benefits. And I think you also did mention a bit about the DAO to DAO relationship and perhaps like some sort of mergers. And I think we start to see a lot of token swaps actually happening. And in fact, I would foresee that this will be a good way to align incentives and also kind of build a revenue or business model in a way, right? Where like, look, I'm being used by so many of these DAOs, and I can have my own token that I distribute to my contributors and my builders and my partners. And in a similar way, if I am running a DAO and I want to collectively make a decision that like, hey, look, we are using these infrastructure players, we should actually give them some ownership of our DAO as well. So then you get like a mutual ownership. And if either one or any one of the DAOs do well, then the tokens have more value. Then we actually can all capture that value collectively as the ecosystem players, right? And in fact, I think some of it could already start to happen through the existing mechanisms. So one example is currently we see a lot of players who are open source or free. They will ask for donations on Gitcoin grants, right? So that often happens with a fund matching, and then you're talking about stable coins, talking about ETH. Perhaps those can be also done in the native tokens, where like, hey, look, let's see who is the most useful, and let's have this matching. In fact, I think they're trying to build something like that, where like, hey, let's have a grant matching system of like who's the most useful, and then we will give them some of the tokens by a community decided mechanism, right? And so it becomes more like a public goods funding in a way, but we have shared skin in the game.
100%. I think the last point, like the quadratic funding, I just believe like this should be the way, because there will be certain kind of tools which will maybe not have like a financial angle, and they'll be very, very important for DAOs, right? I don't have any like certain example, but definitely it's a broad space and the tooling will come. So this should exist, right? If certain tool is being used by a lot of DAOs and should create like a culture, as you are saying, they should have like a proper sustainability through public funding, and those funding funds can become in a native token of the DAOs as well, and so that their treasury will start accumulating, and then the interesting design space of treasury management comes there, right? So that's how they'll sustain over a longer term. So I just feel like definitely it's a very interesting perspective to see this coming.
Yeah, for sure. Are there any kind of early examples that you like to highlight, or some early ideas that you are already trialing out?
Not now.
Yeah. I think this is something that will invite more people.
Yeah.
If you are innovating or if you are doing something like this, please reach out to us as well. I think we all
100%.
love to understand and perhaps share some of the experiences with the audience.
I would say like I just feel I think Gnosis will be the forefront here, and they'll try a lot of new thing, because I like their way of thought process where they are doing this vested airdrops to align interest in the long term, right? Nobody has done it that correctly with the ecosystem players other than the users. So I think that maybe they'll set some certain examples where as an industry we learn like how the DAO tooling should think about it as a value accrual over long term. So that is something we are very interested.
Yeah, for sure. In terms of timing as well, it is very early, and one thought I have is that currently we are at the point in Web3 where previously we were building a lot of the core infrastructure, be it from the public blockchains, and now we're trying to scale those public blockchains. And then we built like the financial infrastructure, and now we also have like DAO infrastructure. But arguably, a lot of the skeptics will say that, and the cynics will say that, hey, look, there's no real value yet. Because all this crypto is all in the Ponzinomics, and it's like a virtual value, right? People are just farming and dumping, and partly, I guess some part of it is right, because there is a lack of a real economy that is being built here, that people are coming in to consume some sort of like goods and services and experiences, are coming in to pay for some of their needs that address the real life pain points. So I would argue that we are at a point where, with the emergence of the idea of a metaverse, And the idea that you would live in this virtual space and have virtual assets, hold virtual activities, have digital organizations which are formed in to run some of these activities, provide some of these goods and services. Once we have that, then we actually have like real economy DAOs and like real economy assets that are actually in the metaverse. And then it makes sense for that value to start to flow back to the underlying infrastructure. Because for now, like all we have is basically we can issue some tokens to solve the cold start problem, to bootstrap usage. But eventually it's supposed to lead to that state where there's like real activity going on and then capture that value, right?
100%. If you just see like, there are a lot of examples you can see, like certain DAOs have started like, quite decentralized on day one. And end of the day is like, if you don't have like a really good business model, you need a vesting on your token to really sustain over time. And token, if their token does not have any value, there is no other way out right now. If you just see the minimum thing you can do with your token is like doing the vesting. And if you just see, like there are larger networks, even they're raising funds. And why they need it, like they need like a locking on the supply, practically speaking, right? So there is, I kind of definitely, we are at that stage. I just feel it in a way where still we are in that stage where we have not figured out the real economics, as you are saying, but we know like this is something going to be very, very big. And now now to sustain that, right, to sustain that, there are two approaches. The first approach is you build something, prove it is usable, then launch a token and do it. The other way is like launch a token and find like, if the product market fit is not there, because you're not going to have any revenue, right, that easily. And why will someone really hold? Then you need like strategic investors. So it's like a equal level game, right, from both sides. End of the day, you're doing vesting. In equity, you are doing vesting. In token, you are also doing vesting. So the question is, when we'll find those use cases when certain value will accrue? And I just feel it is pretty early right now, definitely, because there are 2-3 major use cases we have defined as an industry. Like, like one is definitely Ethereum. I just feel like as a decentralized kind of computer which has certain value, and how the main economics is running. Then Bitcoin is there, but then the underlying games are DeFi, definitely Uniswap is there, and then certain primitives. But there are tons of applications which don't have any value right now, and they're more majorly focused on certain aspect, but they are just speculated, right, through the tokens, and they're doing a lot of things. And that is the truth as well, but it is the truth for any industry which has a lot of money and which has a lot of experimentation, right? And people made a lot of money in the internet bubble as well. So I will just say this is a part of the game, and the certain 10% which will really change the behavior of the entire world will be there in few years. And in DAOs, I just feel it's like a superset of the entire industry. So you can have, maybe without token, you can have a DAO. You can have any community converted into a DAO. You can have any NFT DAO into a DAO, right? You can literally create any group and convert it into a DAO and achieve certain mission. That is kind of a superset, and that is why I just feel there are n number of ways we can go wrong here. Right. So there are very few pieces where we need to go right, and there is certain examples should exist where we need to go right, and that is just a part of the game, and it will take some time. But I think the people who are here for the long term will do this.
Absolutely. So all we can do now is to encourage experimentation.
Yes.
And not lose sight of that ultimate goal, right? And not delude ourselves and think that actually token is the final product. And to let the token value go. It's part of the tool set for us to use to get to that final stage where there's an actual value creation and an accrual. So absolutely. Well, we are coming close to the hour mark, right? So I would like to close unless you have other parts to talk about. So I'd like to close with a bit of this call to action. I think we're already coming to that actually from our final discussion. So what else would you like to see, right? What would your call to action to the builders of the space and the users of this space, and of course talking about Coinshift version 2 as well?
100%. So yeah, I think my ask from the industry is like, if you just understand this thesis of layer 0, layer 1, and layer 2, just try to be more composable with each other, and that is very, very important. Otherwise, we'll create like a similar kind of models in Web 2. So try to create standards, and I just don't feel like this is the time we are just competing. We're not even started. Like, what is the competition, right? So each one of us could be very, very big if we really do it really good for the user. That is the all ethos about the industry. So lack of standardization is definitely there, and we want to lead that path as well with the V2. But I think I would definitely, like, new builders should really think through these things while building anything. Either build to the primitive level. If you're building like the silos kind of use case thing, just think about the composability. How will you really help users to navigate through other interfaces, right? So this is first, and then yeah, I think I would like to see what kind of new DAOs will come, which have some real kind of effect. So Constitution DAO was just getting started, but obviously they were not able to do that. But it's fine. I think new kind of experimentation. I just feel like good experimentations should come through these new primitives. I just want to see more of that rather than Web 2 for Web 3. It should be new, right? It should be like people should be more creative with this ethos, and that is something I would like to see. And other than that, I think for V2, I would just say, like, today we don't have any dashboard where we can just go and say, like, these are my 10 Gnosis safe accounts across 10 different networks, and it could be EVM or non-EVM tomorrow. And as an organization, there is no home for my treasury. There is no transparency between multiple committees. There is no access control system, very sophisticated, right? And the user experience is not that great when bridging between these systems. So V2 is all about that. V2 is all about transparency between multiple committees, and we are really here to solve this problem of transparency for DAOs. Yeah.
All right. And I presume there's an open beta as well that's coming out that people can participate?
Yeah, so we are opening our beta from 17th of this month. So feel free to reach
17
out.
May, right? Because by the time the podcast is out, yeah.
Yeah, 17th of May.
Awesome, awesome. So builders of DAO Infra, do check it out. And let's build a more composable infrastructure stack for DAOs.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you so much again, Tarun, for joining us today. It's such an insightful conversation, and we hope to energize more builders out there.
100%. Thanks for inviting me.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and see you next